Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.
Hi, I'm Town Supervisor Paula Mahan, and welcome to this edition of Colonie Connect. Today we have our special guest, Craig Blair. Craig is our comptroller in the town. Welcome, Craig.
Thank you, Paula.
And we're going to give you an overview of the much publicized circumstances regarding the town's finances. One of the things that we have talked about, Craig, is getting a lot of public input. And we've been able to do that over the last several sessions at our board meetings. And we had a special town board meeting, which was dedicated solely to finances. And the great part of that meeting was, the great effect was that we received a lot of good feedback.
Yes, we did.
And I've been receiving feedback over the last week on a consistent basis. And I know many other members of our staff, it's the same way. Everybody's been getting calls and emails. So the feedback is really important, and we welcome that. I think it's important for people to understand the situation, and it's also important for people to understand that it's a situation that, although it's very critical, it is something that we can solve. And our goal is to reach fiscal stability, and we will do that. Mm-hmm. So there is a light at the end of the tunnel. You know, it's a hard time, and these things happen. These things happen in many municipalities. But sometimes, people are made aware of these difficulties in different manners. And we became aware of the financial issues in Colonie through the Moody's report that was released back in the summer of 2007.
Correct.
And they had reported that there was a deficit just under $9 million. Can you explain a little bit about what Moody's report means and what our bond rating is?
Mm-hmm. As you know, you and I, and we went down with our financial advisor to meet with Moody's to discuss our current bond situation, which is a Baa1 with a negative outlook. What that is for the average person, if you, I'm sure you've probably seen the commercial on TV where they say your credit score is such and such. Yeah. It's similar to that. Moody's is an investment service that rates municipalities and private industries also, so that the investors, when they go out, they know what type of bond or what type of organization they're getting involved in. And what they do is, whenever you go out to the public sector to sell bonds, which all municipalities do it at one point in time, whether you're buying equipment or land or something like that, when there's a large expense that they can't burden the taxpayers with in one fell swoop, then what they do is they go out and bond it. And when they do that, they have to have something, investors want something to compare it to. So Moody's is an investment service, as I said, that comes in and rates municipalities and the businesses. They look at your financial statements, and basically they're looking at the financials as an investor. They don't care whether you're a municipality or a business of what political orientation you are, whether you're a woman-owned organization or whatever. They strictly look at a business point of view from the standpoint, can you make money and can you pay the bills? They rate that on a series that goes from AAA rating, which is one of the betters, all the way down to what some people consider junk bonds. And in between there, each letter and each what we call a tick, which would be if you're AA and then you go down to a single A, that's a tick, you've gone down or up. Each one means a certain meaning. And Baa is a low rating, obviously, and then when you put a negative outlook on it, it makes it an even lower rating. When you go out into the market to sell those bonds, the investors look at that, and that determines whether they'll buy them, at what rate they'll buy them at, and it goes from there.
Okay. Well, I think it's very clearly stated, and it is important for people to understand what all of these terms mean, because Yeah, it's not something that people focus on a daily basis. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I know we've been spending a lot of time on it, but we want our community to understand what this is all about. I certainly learned a lot through our visit with Moody's, and one of the positive effects of our visit is that Moody's has agreed not to lower our bond rating at this time.
Correct.
And we unfortunately still have the negative outlook, but our goal is at some point as we progress to have that removed and to bring that bond rating back up. Okay, at one point I think we were at a AAA
Yes, at one point.
rating, and we'd love to be there again. So that's what we're working on. And of course, as you said, when we have this type of rating, credit rating, along with this negative outlook, it does make it very difficult when you go out, you know, to sell bonds and do these kinds of things. So it's very important that we get that rating improved. So I'm glad we had the opportunity to take the visit. Another area that we received our information on our financial situation is from the State Comptroller's report. Our State Comptroller, Tom DiNapoli, they've done a routine audit, and it was released in February of 2008. And the deficit as of June 11th, 2007, was reported to be at approximately $18 million. And at the end of 2006, December of 2006, some of our auditors also entered their reports at 2006. And at that point, the deficit was a little over $14 million.
Correct.
So we know what the numbers are, and we know how far the State Comptroller's report went. It went to June 11th of 2007. So we have to continue, you know, to get the rest of the numbers for 2007 and keep progressing there. Can you highlight just a few points from the Comptroller's report so we can see where some of the areas are that we're trying to improve upon?
Yes. As you said, beside the final number for the deficit, and again, it ran two different periods from our 14 million versus their 18 million, as you said. There are some areas in there that they found that needed attention to. There were a number of things about where the deficit arose. I know a lot of people are out there always saying, well, where's the money? Where did it come up from? And it's a series of things. One of the things that they mentioned was board oversight. Another of the areas that they were mentioning were taking money from certain other departments and using it to supplement the general fund. Basically what they were saying was the general fund, if you look at the town as a large corporation and you have several little subsidiaries, and you have what we call enterprise funds, and that would be the landfill, which is like a small company, a subsidiary. And we also have Latham Water and Pure Waters. They are all enterprise funds. And we also have what now, recently they started the highway fund. And then you have the general fund, which is the town with all the other departments, the police department, EMS. And these are the things that really the town has to generate income to run. Your Pure Waters has that would be sewer, which a lot of people don't understand. They have their own tax rate. Same way in Latham Water, they have the billing rate that they send out. Now in Pure Waters, they are a little bit more of an enterprise fund because by law, there's certain money that you cannot take from them. For example, we do take money from them. We transfer money over at the end of the year for services that we provide. We pay all their bills for them. We run all the money through, we do the payroll and so on. So for those administrative services, there's been a formula that's created to charge back, so to speak.
Okay.
So we do those to the enterprise funds. Some of the other enterprise funds, for example, the landfill and Latham Water, we can take their surpluses and use them to supplement the running of the general fund.
Okay.
Try not to, because they need them for reserves and in case something happens and everything. Ultimately, you really shouldn't be doing that. You're depending on it. So that was one of the issues that they brought up. We were depending too much on the landfill and other enterprise funds to transfer money to supplement the general fund. So that was an issue that the Comptroller's Office requested that we try to shy away from and start becoming more independent in the general fund. Another issue was that they found where we were overestimating our revenues and underestimating the expenses. So certain years we had deficits for that. Basically, our revenues come from, mortgage tax, sales tax, things like that, user fees, and you have to try to keep your expenses in line with your revenues.
Mm-hmm.
And that's basically it in a nutshell of where they requested that we do certain things. We have 90 days from the time that the audit was submitted to us to respond to them with a sound financial plan, and as far as what we're going to do. And that was something that we had brought down to Moody's also.
And I know, working with just a draft and some ideas, there were some things that Moody's particularly liked. And they did stress the idea of reducing or eliminating the reliance on the RANs for borrowing, for operating costs, as well as relying on the landfill for operating costs. So those were two things that both Moody's and the comptroller, state comptroller's office, as well as Munistat, our financial advisors, and BST, our auditors, all recommended. So that is certainly something that we will focus on and try to improve as time goes on. And of course, we are both new in these positions, only being here for a little over 90 days, as well as we have a transition with some new board members, and then we have some former board members that have returned. So it's a whole new transition for everybody.
Yes, absolutely.
And, but one thing is we all in this entire community own this problem, unfortunately. But again, it is something that we're dealing with, and we will resolve the situation. We know how we got here, and we know that now we have to take the proper steps to work our way out of this situation. And I know in our past 90 days, we've been working on trying to save money from the budget wherever we could. And some of the things that we've implemented have been a freeze on all non-essential spending. Through attrition, people either retire or move on to another position. If possible, we haven't filled those vacancies, or if needed on a part-time basis, we've been able to do that and save quite a bit of money there, as well as consolidating some positions and taking on a little bit more in some positions. And simple things like limiting conferences out of town that are very expensive, limiting dues, fees, things like that.
We're basically looking at everying.
We're
You're
looking
right.
at
Yeah,
everything.
I mean, and the department heads and even the employees, I get calls all the time, and I'm sure you do. I found another way we can save some money. And even though some people call up and say to me, I found a way to save, some money, it's only $500, but we have like 26 departments in the town, and $500 over the 26 departments, it adds up to some money. And there's a lot of things that we're taking a second look at because it's new to us, so we're looking into it. We're all trying to learn. The attorney's office is looking at all the contracts because they have to learn them also. There's a lot of things in my department that we're looking at. And because of that, some of these things have come about. And as you said, a lot of the department heads have come up with ideas, and we've saved a lot of money in various departments. And for some departments, as you had mentioned in one particular department I'm thinking about, where they didn't replace a position, it saved us around $45,000 just in the salary, not mentioning the fringe benefits. But that department only had about 4 or 5 people in it. So that's like a 60% drop in their expenses.
Definitely.
Where if you take the police department and they don't hire, for example, and I'm not saying this isn't going to happen, but for example, they don't hire a patrolman, in that department, the cost of that department is so huge that it would be probably a 1 or 4%. But still, so some departments are really looking at their payroll, they're looking at their expenses, and they're really, really chipping in.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's been great, the collaboration back and forth through that process. Department heads have been working very hard to come up with creative ideas on how to save money, and with everyone working together. At this point, in only about 90 days, we've saved about $800,000, which is a substantial amount of money. So I think if we keep doing that and you know, stay on that path, it will benefit us greatly in the end. And I think the other part of it is that it's proving that with being very cautious and a lot of oversight, and really taking a look at each move that you make, that you can still provide the services and have what we need and actually improve efficiency.
Correct.
And save money at the same time. So that's the good part of that, and I think that collaborative effort is so critical.
We really haven't cut services to a point where anybody's really noticed it yet. Some of these changes that we've done, obviously we've been there for 90 days. We've got a long way to go. We haven't stopped. We'll continue, and I'm sure as long as you're in office, you'll probably continue, you know, on a daily basis, not as strongly maybe, but we'll still continue to look at things. But, you know, we've cut back on certain areas where I don't think the general public will notice. And the services, as you say, are still going to be there. And we're all trying to do whatever we can. And this is just the first step in many that we're going to make to try to make the town more efficient and save as much money. Are we going to save $18 million? I don't think so, but
no.
We can make a good dent in it.
Yeah. Every little bit helps, and I think you know, I think that brings us to the point of a really solid, comprehensive plan, a strategic financial plan. It needs to be comprehensive with a lot of components. It's not something that just one thing is going to cure it. And that's why it's so important with any sound financial plan. It has to be very diversified. It has to have a safety net. It has to allow us to reach our goal, follow a timeline, those types of things. And by laying it out that way, it's very user-friendly and it's very easy to monitor. And that's important, because one thing you don't want to do is to get on a path and then find out it's, you know, not working, and it's too late, and you've been doing the same thing over and over, when with some minor modification to the plan, you can get it back on course and save a lot of money. So
well, you bring up
I think
a good
the
point.
plan is critical.
Oh, absolutely. And as you say, you know, a new, fresh set of eyes, which we get from the taxpayers all the time. I always relate it to probably a bad accountant thing, but you can stare at a set of numbers for hours and hours and hours, and you're looking for something and you can't find it, and somebody could come in 2 minutes and look at it and go, there it is. It's just, it's there so plain, but you can't see it. You need another set of eyes. So maybe there, as you've always said, we look to not only internally, but also the taxpayers themselves with their ideas, because there may be something that's right in front of us, but we don't see it. And that also is another reason why the transition, there's a new set of eyes looking at everything. And you're right, it's not just one thing, and that's what, bringing it back to Moody's again, you know, they know there isn't one thing that's going to do it. Okay, if you know, if we won the lottery and I won the lottery and I talked to my wife and we decided, okay, we'll give the town $18 million, Moody's is going to say that's fine, but what else are you going to do? Because you need to start getting on a straight course. So it's, as you say, the strategic plan is a series of a number of things. Yeah,
and I do think too, you know, when we talk about services, that is a priority for us. We've become accustomed to a high quality of services in Colonie, and we want to make sure that that continues. But you look at things, when you look at things carefully and you're really watching what you're doing, you can tell the difference between what's a good quality service that's actually being used and needed versus over time circumstances have changed and you pick up waste. You find the waste, and that's important because sometimes you're doing things for a long time, a long period of years, and if there are no changes, what happens is the waste goes unnoticed. And so that's something that we've all been alerted to. And I think that's part of the reason that we've been able to generate a savings in such a short period of time. So again, looking at the components and prioritizing, what are our needs, what can we afford to do, and still have a very high quality of life in the town of Colonie, because that's important to all of us. So for my purposes, we don't want to do anything just to say we did it. We want to make sure we're doing it for the right reasons, and that the results are what we're looking for.
And I also think, besides sending the message to Wall Street, we're also sending the message to the taxpayers that we realize that we're in a situation, we're doing everything in our power to try to correct the situation, and we're looking for ways to overcome the problem.
And I think that the most important thing too is when we prepare the budget for 2009, that's going to be a very important process that we're going to have to look for our checks and balances and making sure it's very structured and accurate. And also, what I'd like to see is, in the past, as a resident, it's been difficult to follow the money in the budget because most of it is things are grouped in categories and kind of clusters.
Yes.
And then you see a large amount, but you really don't know what that.
Well, it's kind of difficult.
Yeah.
As I alluded to with the enterprise funds, it is a large town. We have a number of different subsidiaries, so to speak, and to be honest with you, if you had every line item, you would probably have about 150 pages on a budget. I don't think very many taxpayers would want to pour through that.
No.
Although probably if they're watching a show at 10 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock in the morning, they may want to pour through it to get to sleep. But you do run into a situation where you have to condense some of it so that people can read it. But at the same time, you can still have the availability of the breakdown of what they are.
Yeah, I think if there are any improvements that we can make to make it a little bit more user-friendly, any changes, minor changes.
Well, recently we're very lucky. The GFOA, the Government Finance Officers Association, has their annual meeting right here at the Marriott. And last week they were here for 3 days, and the Deputy Controller, John Maddox, and I spent a great deal of time there. And one of the nice things about it being in our backyard is we don't have to spend the whole day there. We can go down for some seminar that they have and come back and do some work. One of the things they had was budget presentation, and they had 2 speakers, and we both sat in on it, and it was a very enlightening seminar, and we learned a great deal, not just from that, but from a number of the courses that they had there. And there are different ways that we looked at that we can present our budget, and
Good.
We're going to look into that for this year.
I think that's helpful, and it's great that that conference was right in our backyard, so we could take advantage of that. A couple other things I'd like to just clarify for our audience. When we talk about different ideas for our financial plan, everyone has a lot of different ideas, and so we kind of throw them out there. One thing that our financial advisor had recommended, and Moody's seemed to really like the idea of it, was this concept of a deficit bonding as a safety net. And my interpretation of that is, to me, it sounds like almost like a line of credit that in the event that when we finally get all of our numbers for 2007 and we know where we are, if something really major occurred, that safety net would be in place, and if it was granted, we could use it if we needed it, but if we didn't, we wouldn't have to touch it. So maybe you could just explain a little bit about what that is.
Sure, I'd be happy to. A lot of people think it's bad. It really isn't. Not that you want to depend on it, and Moody's, I'm sure, would not look, or Wall Street per se, would not look greatly on it if you do it all the time, because you're not solving your problem. But in essence, what you're doing when you go for the deficit funding, you're saying, we have an issue, we have a problem, and we have to address it. Mm-hmm. We can do a number of things. We can go out to the taxpayers and say, okay, listen, your tax bill is going to go up 200% for the next 4 years to overcome this deficit. Or you look to whatever you can do. And again, in our plan when we went to Moody's, which is another portion of the plan that we have to respond back to the mm-hmm. state controller with, we had sale of certain property and a number of things. And this was one subject there. They particularly like it because we're admitting that, okay, we're in a serious situation. Uh-huh. And you're right, it is very similar to a line of credit. What happens is it takes a resolution by the town board. Okay. I believe it's called the home rule or something like that. Okay. The town attorney knows much better. And then we have to get our legislators, our local legislators involved, and they have to present a bill to the state legislature, and it has to pass. At that time, if they pass and say, okay, we will provide you the deficit funding, then the state controller's office comes in and performs an audit. Okay. And in this case, it would probably go through December of 2007. Okay. They would determine how much money, what the deficit is, and how much money you would be able to borrow. And it would basically be up to a certain amount. Okay. Just for argument's sake, so we don't scare anybody or anything like that, let's just call it $10 million. They come in and say it's going to be $10 million. This is what we'll give you. Then we say, okay, now we have to go out and put the bond out for $10 million. What we would probably do is, you don't know for sure. We have, in our case, we have certain issues that we may, we have some various properties that we're looking at selling and so on and so forth. What you can do, now this is getting very technical for people, but we can do a short-term 1-year borrowing, which is called a BAN, which was a bond anticipation note. So, okay. In other words, we may not want to borrow that full $10 million. If we can come up with enough money to, let's say, get $5 million or $6 million within that year, then we only borrow the $4 million from the state. And again, you're just borrowing the money from the state. You're allowed to borrow it up to, I believe the extent is 10 years. Okay. And it's really there for that line of credit. You can pay it off early. The interest rate is determined by the state. And again, the amount that you can borrow is determined by the state. The state controller has certain regulatory provisions for the town in our case. And what we would have to do is, on a quarterly basis, submit to them a copy of financial statements that we do on a quarterly basis, which we do monthly anyway. So that we would submit it to them, and they would look it over, and they would see how we're doing as the years progress. And then in addition to that, we would draw up our budget for the following year, and then we would have them come in and they would look at it as a second set of eyes, as most people call it. And they would look at it and say, okay, this is presentable, this is a sound, structurally sound budget. By that, they would look at the revenue, if you normally take in $30 million in sales tax revenue, if you put in there, $40 million, with the economy the way it is, they may say that's not a realistic number, let's fine tune it. And that's basically the oversight that they have. And again, you're right, it is like a safety net or more of a line of credit. You may never need it. And it's not going to be there forever. They would give you a certain period of time to use it. Okay. But it is a very good safety net, and it's, as I said, Wall Street looks at that as you're admitting that, okay, we have a serious problem. It's almost like an alcoholic. We have a serious problem, we're going to address it. And you're not relying on that one thing because, number one, the legislature may not pass it. Right. So if you go and say to Moody's or even the taxpayers and say, this is what we're going to do, you need something else in there, because if that doesn't go through, then what's your second guess? What's your second plan? Right. Well, I think the idea of a safety net is great. And again, there's no guarantee it would pass, or you could get it, or everyone would vote on it. But I think that it's an option. It's an option to look into.
And again, hopefully with a solid plan, we could reach our goal without having to use anything like that. But it's nice to have options. And I think one of the other ideas that we came up with, and again, this is something that is not finalized, but it was the idea that actually came up several times from some people in transition, from some residents. I think you may have mentioned something like it at one time, but it really kind of hit home after that public session we had for the special board meeting we had about a week and a half ago. And I was getting calls and people were saying, let's just bite the bullet, you know, one shot, let's get this over with. And it was interesting because, you know, the concept was always there, but it's like, would people like that? And when you really think about it, it became really one of the more practical things because, again, we all own the problem. And as a community, we have to do our fair share. And my contention from the beginning is that the taxpayers are not the people that should carry the full burden, and really they didn't create it, so it's an unfortunate situation for everyone. But I think you know, just as an example, we came up with an idea of a house in the range of that would be on the market, a $250,000 house, somewhere around a one-time deficit corrective tax of you know, $200, $250, something like that, and a sliding scale based on assessments, so people on in houses that are assessed lower would not be hurt. And again, people that have houses assessed really high, that there's a cap, so they're not abused. And so it's fair and equitable, and a way to generate enough with the rest of a solid plan to probably pretty much get rid of the deficit in 1 year, which would be almost a miracle.
You're right.
And what I like about it is when a tax increase is imposed, and I in no way, shape, or form support, you know, a 20-25% tax increase. To me, that's unacceptable. And but I know some cities and towns have done that to get out of debt. But what happens with that is that tax increase stays with you for a long time. And, you know, I'm here now. I hope to be here for a while, but I know I won't be here forever. And I don't know anybody that comes in after me if they would ever give that tax back if, you know, and lower people's tax rates. So I have a feeling that, you know, it's something that would be with people forever.
I always use the example of the thruway. You know, when it first came out, we're going to use tolls until we pay for the road, and I believe the road probably has been paid for, but it never goes away. And you're right. That is another alternative that I know a lot of department heads and people in the public, and I think somebody on your transition team, it's been a thought that had been around for a while. And when we got that feedback from that meeting, and you and I and Mike and a couple other people sat down, this concept came up and said, why don't we really seriously look at it? And then the figure that we threw out, like you said, was around 200, 250 or something, and that's not a cast in stone at all. We still have a lot of work to do to see what the figure is going to be. But it's a one-time shot. We're done and over with it. And if you look at the deficit financing as a safety net, and if this doesn't go through or that doesn't go through and we end up with a deficit financing, if it goes through its process and we're allowed to use it, we're going to borrow that $10 million. Well, we'll use a $15 million rule, okay? We're going to borrow that $15 million. We still have to pay that $15 million back.
Yes.
So just over 10 years, that's $1.5 million. Just the principal on that $1.5 million would probably, based on our property tax, would probably be around a 25% tax increase. Now, it wouldn't go up every year for the 10 years, but that 25, as you say, that 25% tax increase would be there for the next 10 years, and I agree with you. I doubt anybody would, at the end of that time, say, you know what, we're going to drop your taxes by 25%. And we are currently, in my office, working up those numbers so that we'll get an idea of just about how much we would save by going either the one-time shot or the deficit financing. And the other nice thing about the one-time shot is, if you stop and think about it, we'll use a $250 imaginary figure. If property taxes had gone up for the last 7, 8 years, at a 4 or 5% tax increase over those years, you pay more than at $250 over those years.
Yes.
So you're really just paying the tax that maybe or possibly should have been applied over those years. You're paying less than that now to put us back on a stable ground. And we as a town, we have to do our fair share too. We have to cut our expenses, as we said, make sound
Definitely.
fiscal budgets. So there are benefits to the one-shot.
Yeah, what it is it's a correction.
Yes.
That's what it is. And I use the analogy of, let's say, a family of 4 going down to a concert maybe down in Albany and going out to dinner. Just in that one evening, that would probably be close to a couple $100. And I know it's painful. It's painful to give things up. And trust me, over the last 90 days, and you know because you've been going through it, it's a painful experience.
Absolutely.
And it's never easy asking people for money. And but I do know in the long run, we want to save people money and we want to get back on track. So again, it's another one of the ideas and options. And I guess we could go on for hours about all of this, but I think we're just about out of time.
Okay.
And I want to thank you very much for being on our show today.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Great.
It's very nice.
And so we'll end with that note. And I'm Town Supervisor Paula Mahan. Thank you for tuning in to Colonie Connect.
Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.